All right, man, peace. So, brothers, we're approaching what is commonly known in NFL circles as Championship Sunday. The New Orleans Saints will be facing off against the LA Rams on the NFC side of Championship Sunday. And let me say this, and this sentiment will pretty much apply to both championship games. It's very difficult for a very good to great team to beat another very good to very great team twice. It's very, very difficult to do that. Because normally what very good or very great teams or individual athletes are great at is adjusting, making sure that they can create different variations on what did not work the previous time and hope that it may end up being a different outcome in the second engagement. For example, I remember back in the day, Floyd Mayweather and Zab Judah were very good friends in the amateur boxing program and also in the early portion of their professional boxing careers. And their relationship changed almost unalteringly after Zab decided that he was going to challenge Floyd Mayweather to a sparring match. The sparring match did not go well for Zab, and it of course culminated in them eventually meeting in a real fight in 2006. Point being is this: you don't want to give your rivals too good a look at what you do. And I believe that the New Orleans Saints played as well as they could play in their first engagement against the Los Angeles Rams a couple of months ago, where they were able to defeat the Rams in New Orleans. I believe the final score was 45-35. They got off to a very fast start. It seemed as if at the time that Jared Goff was a bit nervous. They were still able to eventually tie the game up. Please keep in mind that the Rams entered that contest without the services of Mr. Aqib Talib. He will be available this Sunday. And I think that he's going to be one of the difference makers. But of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
But it's Championship Sunday. Fire it up, baby. Can't wait. It all goes down in the Big Easy. Drew Brees and the Saints will host Jared Goff and the Rams in the Superdome. New Orleans is favored by 3.5. Let's get right into it. Max Kell.
Yep.
Who's winning it?
Before Max Kelman or Stephen A. Smith responds, let me say this. I do believe that the Rams will be able to defeat the Saints this Sunday. As I stated earlier on in this video, it's very dangerous whenever you're facing off against a great competitor and you give them too much of a look at what you do. I don't think that the Saints can play any better than they played in the regular season. I think the Rams can play much, much better. I believe they're going to utilize Todd Gurley much more, as they should. This is playoff football. You have to run the football. I believe that they're going to get much better play out of their secondary. I think that their defensive line is going to play exemplary. And Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald, they're going to dominate. I believe they're going to sack Drew Brees at least 4 times in the game. It's going to be a very competitive game. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be a high-scoring game. As of right now, I'll say the final score will be Rams 28, New Orleans Saints 20. But we'll see what happens.
The Los Angeles Rams are winning the NFC Championship. And I predicted them to win the Super Bowl before the season started. I thought last year the only thing they were missing was some playoff experience for Jared Goff. He has it now. Same thing with McVay, by the way, as the head coach.
And McVay really impressed me with his coaching in last week's victory against the Dallas Cowboys. It's very difficult for a genius to get out of his own way, and he was able to do that. Sometimes the best recourse is the simplest one. When you can dominate the line of scrimmage, keep doing it until they stop it. The Cowboys never stopped it, so they kept doing it.
There are more specific reasons even than that. We saw them come almost all the way back on the Saints. The first time they played at New Orleans, they wound up losing the game. But recall, the Rams started the season, they hit the highest peak early in the season. Then the Saints hit their highest peak right around the time they played the Rams. The Saints have been in steady decline since then.
Absolutely. Ever since the Dallas Cowboys put their foot in the Saints' asses, the Saints have not been the same since then. They've pretty much just been trying to tread above water since then. Drew Brees is a great quarterback, but he is a quarterback with limitations. I'm on record as stating I believe that he's gotten the most out of his abilities and out of his stature, arguably of any athlete in the history of professional sports, in America anyway. You can fluster him and you can get him to throw interceptions. So we'll see what happens this week. Once again, in their last matchup, Aqib Talib was not available. Marcus Peters matched up against Michael Thomas and got roasted. In this matchup, I'm sure that Aqib Talib will receive the full assignment against Michael Thomas. We'll see if he can do a better job. I'm sure that he will, because you can't do much worse. And that will put Marcus Peters against the secondary wide receiver, who Drew Brees very rarely ever throws to.
Little bit, not bad. They're still a great team, but they are not what they were, let's say, 2/3 of the way through the season. Last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Part of that is they were on the road, but part of that is they haven't been playing as well. Now they're missing their defensive tackle, and what are they seeing in the Rams? The Rams have discovered C.J. Anderson to go with Todd Gurley.
Now that last highlight that we just saw of Cooper Kupp is going to show you what they will be missing. The Rams will be missing Cooper Kupp. So if the Saints are able to stifle the running attack, it will be very interesting to see if Jared Goff is able to push the football down the field, especially over the top. Because Cooper Kupp has ended up being a much bigger loss than we may have thought initially.
The Rams have, or Ndamukong Suh has rediscovered himself and is playing like the guy they paid him to be. So you see the offensive line is healthy. And you think about where the game is still won and lost on the line of scrimmage. Who has a pocket, who doesn't? The Rams have a really good offensive line. They're getting a push. They're protecting the quarterback. It's allowing for an incredible two-headed run game. And Gurley can also catch passes, obviously. And it works with the play action with the receivers, even though they're missing Cooper Kupp. And then on the other side, they have those two defensive tackles now, and Ndamukong Suh to go with Aaron Donald, who are collapsing the pocket, nowhere to go. So I think when you add all that up, plus Aqib Talib being back, and Michael Thomas isn't going to go for 212 yards or whatever again, I see a mild upset here. The Rams beating the Saints at New Orleans.
That will not be an upset. If the Rams beat the Saints in New Orleans, that will not be an upset.
I think it's going to be a nail-biter, but I'm going with the home team. I'm going with the Saints. I can't see anybody beat New Orleans in New Orleans, particularly.
Dude, Philadelphia should have done it last week. What are you talking about? Philadelphia was right there at the door, knocking on the door before Alshon Jeffrey dropped the football. They were about to lose last week.
These Rams, I think the absence of Cooper Kupp is definitely going to affect this team. There's no question about it. Obviously, there's cause to pause for you to pick the Rams when you take into account the fact that Sheldon Rankins is going to be out as your defensive tackle for the New Orleans Saints. He's out with the ACL. He's gone for the year. That's a tremendous loss for them when you've got Todd Gurley coming into the house, particularly Todd Gurley with C.J. Anderson, considering what they did against the Dallas Cowboys.
So once again, Sean McVay is going to have to get out of his own way. He's going to have to humble his genius and make sure that he properly tests the defensive line of the New Orleans Saints. He has two great running backs. He has to use them, especially early.
Boys are rushing for about 200 plus, what is it, 200.
They each went for over 100 yards.
Over 100 yards, and they ran for about 278, as a team Saturday night against the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm going to tell you this, even though the Saints haven't been the same, but it was after the Cowboys lost, because even after they beat the Rams and dropped 45 on them, they dropped 51 on Cincinnati, and obviously they dropped 31 on Atlanta, but that's a heated division rivalry, and then after that they lost to the Cowboys, got beat up, haven't been the same since, and they need to get their bearings under them. I'm thinking about Drew Brees. I'm thinking about Michael Thomas. I'm thinking about the Traquan Smiths of the world. I'm thinking about the Alvin Kamaras and Mark Ingrams of the world. I'm thinking about the ability to run on the Rams and how they're not the Cowboys. Sean Payton is a better coach and a better play caller than anybody that you got in Dallas, whether it's Jason.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And it's going to be a great test for the LA Rams defense this coming Sunday. Whether or not they're going to be able to stop the run, because as Stephen A. Smith has already stated, they have Alvin Kamara. They also have Ingram in the backfield. And, of course, knowing Sean Payton and Drew Brees, they're going to try to mix in the play-action pass. It's going to be a major test for the Rams defense, but I do believe that they're going to hold up.
Jason Garrett, Scott Linehan, or what have you. And I think the combination of all of those things are going to put the Saints in a position to really, really make some noise. I will acknowledge that there does need to be a concern. If you're Drew Brees and you're stepping back to pass, throw the football 38, 40 times, that gives Aaron Donald ample opportunities to get at you, which is not something that you want in this game. But I do believe they're going to be able to run on the Rams more effectively than Dallas did. I don't think the Saints are going to be held to 47 yards rushing the way Ezekiel Elliott was.
We'll see. You never know.
Of course, I think Drew Brees is a better passer than Dak Prescott. I think Michael Thomas, at least at this stage, is a little bit better than Amari Cooper. I think the other assets are going to benefit from the play calling of Sean Payton, and I'm going to pick the Saints to win this game. I think it'll be within a touchdown by about 6 or 7 points, but I'm rolling with
I got to tell you something.
I believe the difference in this game is going to come down to coaching once again. As long as Sean McVay stays within himself, they should win this game. The Rams should win this game because, to me, they have discernibly more talent on both sides of the football than the New Orleans Saints. You can argue that the Saints have better personnel defensively, even though that's close to me. Offensively, they have better personnel than the Saints. I think that as long as Jared Goff plays within himself, at least for one game, he can be a wash with Drew Brees. They definitely have better running backs. They have a slightly better offensive line, the Rams do. The wide receiver core, from top to bottom, I think the Rams have a better wide receiver core, even without Cooper Kupp. Because at the end of the day, all the Saints have is Michael Thomas. If Aqib Talib can find a way to limit Michael Thomas, the Rams are definitely going to win this football game, maybe by 2 scores.
If the Saints win, you haven't mentioned the 2 players that my mind goes to that I consider the X factors for the Saints in this game. As someone who's picking the Rams, and by the way, if people are wondering, when you pick a team on national TV, does a part of you root for them? You know, of course, you want to be smart guy. But the things that would make me nervous about the Saints' chances, meaning that they could win, Taysom Hill, who is a baller. That dude is a baller. Can throw, can catch, can run.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a kind of not just trick play because you can involve.
Just to expound on Max Kellerman's long-winded attempt at a point, the Rams, I'm sure, are game planning for Hill and some type of trick play on special teams, because I guarantee you that at some point in the game, unless it's a blowout, and maybe even if it is a blowout on the side of the Saints, Sean Payton will try to execute a trick play, particularly on the special teams.
All of them in so many different ways, but you have to account for him and Ted Ginn Jr. Because that dude, like Michael Thomas is a really good wideout. And if your secondary's banged up and you're attacking a zone, he can be a handful. But he's not the kind of guy where you're like, oh my God, what do you do about him? He's unstoppable, right? He works within a system. But Ted Ginn Jr. is the kind of guy where you're like, ooh, he can get behind the defense, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So I'd say Taysom Hill and Ted Ginn Jr. are the guys that would scare me a little.
It's interesting that you say this. This is the interesting part we want to talk about.
Well, you better put some more respect on Michael Thomas's name. I mean, I know maybe he might not be the most explosive receiver, but when you catch 125 balls, you're somebody that the defensive coordinator staff or the defensive staff better be concerned with, and I'm sure that they are.
Taysom Hill played last game against the Rams when they won 45-35 over the Rams. He didn't catch 1 pass. Traquan Smith, who I brought up, only had 2 receptions for 23 yards. Ted Ginn Jr. wasn't in the lineup. See, these are the kind of things that the Rams have to worry about. The Saints beat you with basically Michael Thomas and Drew Brees. And of course, Kamara and Ingram were running the football, even though Kamara only had 82 yards rushing and Ingram only had 33. In the end, what it comes down to is that, again, I expect them to run effectively, and they'll have more weapons on the field with them this go round.
I want to say that when Taysom Hill played at least 10 snaps, they're 10-0.
Right.
So,
and by the way, they're 17-0 when they get Jared Goff in his career, 17-0 when he gets 120 yards rushing.
Yep.
And now he's got 2 running. See, this is the...
That means, once again, Sean McVay has to make sure that he concentrates on the running game. Put a lot of pressure on Drew Brees to make all their possessions count. When the Saints were down 14-0 last week against the Eagles, there was definite consternation on the face of Mr. Drew Brees. He was worried. And what got them back in the game was when Nick Foles turned the ball over. So as long as Jared Goff did not turn the ball over, they make sure that they use Todd Gurley and Anderson, they should be okay. The Rams I'm talking about.
This is the thing about the NFL and about football generally in a 16-game season. Now, the playoffs, these are not the same 2 teams that met the first time.
Agreed.
So think about what you just said about they didn't even have these guys. Taysom Hill didn't catch a pass, etc. Now you look at the Rams, they didn't have Aqib Talib, C.J. Anderson.
Of course.
You know, I mean, they're 2 different
and the
kind of
Aqib
teams.
Talib matchup.
Agreed.
Matchup, if he's on Michael Thomas, is going to be fantastic as well. At the end of the day, for me, it's about one person, Drew Brees. 6-0 at home. He's a different deal at the Superdome, and 6-0 at home during the playoffs.
He's definitely a different quarterback at home, but you can get to him. As long as they pressure him up front, if the Rams get at least 4 sacks, they should be able to win this game. But to me, that magic number for pressures on Drew Brees will probably be 10, and sacks will be 4. If they can get at least 4 sacks, they should win the game.
I'm with you, Stephen. I think it's the Saints.
The only thing I would say about that is this. I expected more from that offense against the Philadelphia Eagles last week.
Yeah.
That's the point, sir. That's the point, sir. And the Philadelphia Eagles had a very compromised, well, I should say in the latter part of the regular season, the Philadelphia Eagles had a very compromised secondary, which started to play better in the postseason, especially when they got a lot of that Nick Foles mojo. But I would expect the Rams' defensive backs to be even better than the Eagles were.
Yep.
Than I saw. You're going to need to score more points to beat the Rams.
And also,
20 ain't gonna get it
also
done.
one word of warning about that. I, like many, last year thought, oh, it's the Saints because they had Drew Brees. I trust Drew Brees more than the other quarterbacks who were left in the NFC. But they didn't advance. And right now, it's in both
started with the miracle in Minneapolis.
Okay, whatever, but they didn't advance. In both conferences, you have the old tested Hall of Famer against the young gun.
Absolutely. The NFL could not have asked for more when it comes to the NFL playoffs this year, because both conferences, the top two seeds, have advanced to the championship round, and no matter who makes it to the Super Bowl, they already know how they're going to market the game. If it ends up being Brady against Breeze, it's the two older legendary quarterbacks. You also have the defensive mastermind of Belichick against the offensive mastermind of Sean Payton. They were both on Bill Parcells' Giant staff back in the 90s, so we already know how they're going to sell that game. If it ends up being Pat Mahomes against Jared Goff, it's the two new young guns who are going to carry the league into the next decade and a half. They're also, of course, going to reflect back on that legendary regular season matchup a couple of months ago. And then, of course, you have the two offensive masterminds of Andy Reid against Peyton. Now, if they mix it up and it's young against old, if you have Pat Mahomes against Drew Brees, then it's the two MVP candidates and the two offensive masterminds of Andy Reid against Sean Payton. If it ends up being Jared Goff and McVay squaring off against the Patriots, then you have the young gun of Jared Goff against the old legend in Tom Brady. And then you also have the young genius of Sean McVay against the old genius in Bill Belichick. That's how they're going to sell any one of those permutations. So the NFL is, I'm sure, very happy when they saw that in both conferences, the top two seeds advance to the championship round.
And there's a tendency to think we've seen those guys do it before, so they're going to do it. Just because you haven't seen the other guys do it yet doesn't mean they're not going to do it. They may be capable of doing it, just haven't seen it yet.
I have a feeling you're going to go with the youth in both games. I'll be going with the veterans.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how the NFC Championship turns out. But as of right now, I'm going to pick the LA Rams. Final score somewhere around 28-20 or 28-21. And the magic numbers, once again, the Rams have to get at least 4 sacks, at least 10 pressures. Aqib Talib is going to have to hold Michael Thomas under 80 yards receiving, and that will pretty much guarantee a victory for the Rams. If they're not able to meet any of those criteria, the Saints will probably win. So peace.